We compute the elasticity of demand by looking at the percentage change in quantity divided by the percentage change in price. That is, when the percentage change in quantity is larger than the percentage change in price, then we say that a good is elastic. In other words, buyers are more price sensitive. To find the elasticity of demand, then, we use what we call the midpoint formula. The midpoint formula is useful because it doesn't take into effect the direction of change. It's going to give us the same answer for elasticity either way we go. This is the formula for midpoint. And essentially, to just take a look at this, let's start off by separating the numerator and the denominator. On the top of the formula is really just how you would find the percentage change in the quantity demanded. Now, when you take a look at that, it's the change, so the difference between the two quantities, divided by the midpoint between the two quantities. And that's where we want to simplify, is this area right here. This Q2 plus Q1 divided by 2 is just a mathematical way of saying halfway between where we started and where we ended up. Now you'll find that the denominator of this equation is the exact same thing. It's the difference between the two prices divided by the midpoint in between the two prices, or where we started versus where we ended. So each of these, this is our percentage change in quantity, and then down here we have the percentage change in price. So let's look at this example. We have a price increase from $2 to $2.20, and the quantity demanded falling from $10 to $8. So how would we calculate the midpoint? Or I'm sorry, the elasticity of demand using the midpoint formula. Now, when you look at this formula, once again, it looks more complicated. There's a lot of extra numbers here, but you can again simplify it by saying the difference in the quantity, which you could have looked at and just said 2, versus the midpoint between 10 and 8. So if you really want to go to the trouble of adding 8 plus 10 divided by 2, you can do that. Otherwise, you can just say, oh yeah, 9 is the halfway point between 8 and 10. So it's going to be 2 divided by 9. That's a 22% change in quantity. On the bottom of the equation, we have the difference in the price. So it's going to have 20 cents divided by $2.10, and that gives us 9.5. So when you divide these two answers and simplify the whole thing out, you get 2.32. 2.32 means that the good is in fact elastic. When we look at elastic versus inelastic and we consider that midpoint formula, we're really just looking at the value that gets generated. Now, we should always get a negative value for a midpoint formula problem because of the law of demand stating that price and quantity are essentially moving in opposite directions. We ignore that absolute value, or I'm sorry, that negative sign, and we just look at the absolute value, for lack of a better term. Typically, or the rules that we're going to use is that if the price elasticity demand is less than 1, then it's inelastic. And if that elasticity answer that we get from the midpoint formula is greater than 1, then the good is elastic. If it's exactly equal to 1, that's a unit elastic. So what do these numbers mean? Well, inelastic means that the buyers are not very responsive to price change. They're probably going to buy a comparable quantity of the good either way. Elastic demand means the buyers are fairly price sensitive, and unit elasticity, when elasticity of demand equals 1, means that the percentage change in quantity that we're going to get from this change in price, or percentage change in price, are equal. So buyers exactly offset the change in price by their change in buying.